everybody. Welcome to the Gospel According to Marvel. My name is Derek Weston.
And my name's Zane Sanders.
And today we are here talking about the culmination of Phase 1 of the MCU. And that would be Disney's Marvel, the Avengers. Is that right? Is that did I get the order right? Is it Disney?
I don't think Disney doesn't necessarily, even though it has its hands on everything, it doesn't put its name on it. So,
but this
is Marvel's the Avengers. Right?
Well, actually, I think there's some official logo that does have like Disney.
That
has like Disney's Marvel, the Avengers.
Well, and this was the first one for Disney, right?
Right, and this is like, let's just take a moment and like bask in the genius that is Disney, because this is what they do, right? Like they sat back and they watched Pixar make a whole bunch of great movies, and then they bought Pixar. They sat back and, years and years of watching Star Wars, and then they're like, we think we want that. And they did the same thing with Marvel. Like, Paramount had basically distributed all the films, and they had years and years of, at this point it was about 4 years, of watching movies come out, watching them do really well, and then when it's coming to like its most ambitious, like in some ways at this point the biggest gamble of putting all these movies together, Disney says, yeah, we want this, and they haven't really looked back since.
Yeah. Well, and I think with Kevin Feige being in charge of Marvel at the time, I mean, he still is, but he's just really good at foresight, and I think they probably saw that in Marvel. So. Yeah,
and I think his particular vision and genius kind of helped. I mean, he really has been steering the ship since pretty close to the beginning, and I saw something that you posted, an article, recent comments about him, from him, and it seems like he's got a really good head on his shoulders.
Yeah.
Part of what the article was talking about was, what's Spider-Man's future with the MCU, and he's very open of we'll have to make a new deal with Sony, and that's fine. And how do you feel about R-rated movies? And he's like, well, those movies were just really good. They did something new, but I don't think that's what we're gonna do. And what was the other thing? Oh, he was talking about Josh Brolin being cast as Cable, and he was just like, that's cool. He's like, Harrison Ford did Indiana Jones and Han Solo at the same time. It's fine. And it just seems like so chill, like so laid back.
Well, and there was no hint of competition.
Yeah.
In that either. It was just kind of good for him.
Yeah.
Good for all these other studios that are doing stuff. We should work together, and I hope they all do well.
And it seems like at the end of the day, he's just a fan who wants to see good comic book movies made.
Yeah.
And that makes me like him even more. And it sounds like James Gunn, who is also a comic book fan, who just seems to love the properties that he's doing, is getting more creative control. And I think with what he's done with Guardians of the Galaxy and what we suspect from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, I think having him more involved just feels like a win going forward. So that's exciting. So the big Marvel news that we had last week or the week before was the Thor trailer.
Oh my goodness.
What were your thoughts on the Thor trailer?
It was fantastic. And lots of people, I don't know if lots of people are complaining, but they were kind of comparing it to Guardians of the Galaxy and saying, it looks like it's going to be a fun space flick. Which, I mean, it's Thor, so just because his first two films weren't fun doesn't mean this one can't. And I'm so excited to see Mark Ruffalo's Hulk, and that just the final sequence of them going at it at the end was so exciting.
Yeah. So I was one of those people who said that it looked like a Thor trailer turned into a Guardians of the Galaxy trailer, but I totally meant that as a compliment. I felt like this was the element of Thor that hasn't been in the solo movies so much, but definitely has been in the ensemble pieces.
Yeah.
Like when Thor is kind of in those pieces, like Avengers, we're going to talk about today. There is a lot of opportunity for him to be a fun character who's doing banter and and the line which is like the line of the trailer, which is him seeing Hulk and going, "I know him. He's a friend from work." I mean, that was just so fun, and but it does. It looks like it's going to be a big space movie, which, as the last film before Infinity War, like it kind of should be. Like it should be kind of a big space, lead into all of the Avengers going out and doing battle in space.
Well, it's the last film of the main Avengers before Infinity Wars, because Spider-Man comes out 2 months after. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just going crazy looking at my calendar.
Like, no, you can't tell me Spider-Man's coming out later. Oh, you're going to freak me out. You're going to freak me out.
I'm just so excited for Guardians to come out, too, that I'm like,
I know.
No, you're wrong.
Because like there's part of me that's like, no, I can't handle Guardians and Spider-Man this summer, but it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good summer.
And then you shared some links with me. Tell people about, because I didn't know what Freeform was. What's Freeform? Because they're getting a couple of Marvel shows.
Yeah, Freeform is basically the new ABC Family.
Okay.
They're just sort of rebranding. It's another Disney
Property,
TV channel. Yeah. So they're coming out with 2 shows, Cloak and Dagger and The New Warriors. And the trailer for Cloak and Dagger just came out, and it's pretty exciting. It's really early before the release, I think, so they can get some excitement before that release, especially with 2 characters that maybe people don't really know very well.
Yeah. And I'm in that boat of Cloak and Dagger are characters that I know of, but don't know really well. So I think it's but it also kind of fits with an ABC Family kind of theme in that they're teenagers, they're teenage lovers, and kind of and so it's kind of an interesting, kind of an angsty teen looking show. So that's gonna be kind of cool for them. And then the other one is
New Warriors will be similar in the fact that it'll be young people with super powers, probably a little more comedic in the way they go about it, especially with Squirrel Girl being among those ranks. So we'll see how that goes.
And probably with Squirrel Girl being featured pretty prominently. You can't be too serious when your main protagonist is Squirrel Girl. So, I mean, I don't think you can anyway. But so that's pretty exciting. I mean, it is really just amazing to see how Marvel, particularly under the leadership and direction of Disney, has really expanded and really expanded into a lot of different media and a lot of different forms, and really they're able to do kind of this deep dive into a lot of characters that I don't think people ever imagined. I mean, even as much as I've crapped on it, I mean, I think Iron Fist and Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, I think these are characters that people never really imagined being brought to TV, but then ABC Production, which is under Disney, makes this deal with Netflix and brings these 2 great shows and Iron Fist to a mass audience, and we get these Great shows. And Iron Fist.
Well, and Daredevil.
And Daredevil, yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah.
And Daredevil was known a little bit more because Daredevil did have his own solo movie, but we also don't talk about that because that was the dark age of comic book movies, so we don't talk about that. But let's jump in because Avengers is full, and there's tons to talk about with Avengers itself. You remember first viewing of Avengers and first thoughts, first impressions of Avengers?
Yeah, I was in the theaters and I was at the edge of my seat the entire time.
Yeah.
Like, this is even before the movie started. And then, like, through the movie as well.
Yeah. Same. I went kind of middle. It was one of those, like, catch a matinee, ditch work. I went to the theaters all by myself and just, like, got the biggest bag / box / bucket of popcorn I could get them to sell me, and just sat back and like just enjoyed. Like that was just one of those like movies where, I mean, I just remember just being happy, like from the door. That like I like just loved that movie, and there are just so many moments, and we'll get into this, but there's so many moments where it's just kind of like, wow, they pulled this off. And again, after, I mean, we've been talking about this for episodes now, but 4 years of build-up, and they pulled this off.
Yep.
And it was pretty incredible.
So it's almost like, and not to jump ahead,
no, go ahead.
For almost every movie after this, they're like, hey, let's try something new and see if we can pull it off.
Yeah. I mean,
so this really sets the tone for kind of the future. They're like, hey, we can do whatever we want now.
Yeah,
because we did such a great job with Avengers.
which is great. Like it was kind of like the we've earned the right. I mean, at this point, to we've earned a right to we've earned people's trust. We've earned the right to experiment and branch out and bring in new characters and absolutely, who's gonna question them at this point? So anyway, so let's get in here. One of my favorite lines of the movie is said very early on by Loki. He says, "I am Loki, and I am burdened with glorious purpose," which I've decided is something that I would like to just say every time I introduce myself. Is I am Derek, and I am burdened with glorious purpose. For me, I mean, maybe, I don't know if you feel this, but for me, it feels like there's a significant difference between Loki in this film and Loki in the first Thor. And maybe part of that is just in the first Thor, it's not really until the end that you kind of see him as the main villain. And this one, he is throughout. He's kind of playing both sides for most of the first Thor, and then in this one he's kind of just out and out villainous. But I really like the Avengers version of Loki.
Well, he really comes into his villainous self at the end of the first Thor.
Yeah.
And so this is all about revenge and getting what he wants. It becomes much more than just defeating Thor, although that's a big part of it.
Sure.
It's more about just taking over something.
And I think I think actors like to play villains more, and I think that's part of it is just Tom Hiddleston gets to be, he just gets to be this villain. He gets to be this very cool, over-the-top villain. He says some things that I think are really interesting for you know, what kind of what his purpose is, and this is kind of throughout the beginning of the movie. He says, "I've come to set you free from freedom." And from the illusion of freedom, and then later, kind of, but still within kind of the first act of the movie, he talks about you all desire humanity craves subjugation, and this is almost like Loki saying to humanity, "I'm coming to take you over, and I'm doing you a favor," which brings some questions to my mind. I think we've talked a lot about power, but what we haven't talked about is like free will. Free will, and like, what is it part of humanity? Is it part of human nature to give up our free will, to lay down our free will to people that we see as more powerful than us, or people that we think are is that something that is hardwired in us, that we want to lay that part of ourselves down?
Yeah.
I mean, I personally feel like that's kind of a part of who we are, and that's like why we look for charismatic leaders, and that's why we look for people who look like they're in control, people who look like they're success, and without dipping back into this well again. I do think that was a lot of Trump's appeal, was that for a lot of people he looked like, obviously Trump wasn't going to come out and say, you all crave subjugation, although it might have worked. But it did seem like he projected to a lot of people, I'm in control, I have had successes, and you don't have to worry about anything now because I'm in charge. And I don't know. I think that's I do think that is a part of human nature, and it's part that's kind of scary to me.
It's interesting because we've talked about this in some of the other podcasts about power and how these characters view it.
Yeah.
And really, I think all these different views on what power is just, it kind of tells us how vastly different our ideas are.
Yeah.
As individuals, that there's no one way to look at it, and we get into this further with Age of Ultron and all that, but that's...
Yeah. Shannon, my partner, she tweeted as we were live tweeting. She said, "Loki's speech is everything. It's the reason every dictator came to power." And it's that idea that that idea of like, I know what's best for you, I know what's good for you, and so trust me, and I'm going to do this thing. It also made me think. It made me think of Israel wanting a king after the time of the judges, and how that story resonates so much. Of the people of wanting a king, and Samuel saying to the people, if you this is one of the things that I missed about the story when I used to read it, just kind of as a younger person, but reading it now, Samuel tells the people, if you have a king, he's going to enslave your daughters, he's going to enslave your sons, he's going to take your property, he's going to take your wealth, and the people ignore it. We're like, no, everyone else has a king. Everyone else has this one figurehead that they can look up to and say, this is our leader, this is our person who represents us.
Yeah.
I think that's really ingrained in the human nature that we love having this charismatic leader. And I think that's true on the level of nations. I also think it's true and really scary and seductive on the level of churches. I think a lot of pastors have gotten themselves in trouble of like being that charismatic leader that people want to follow, and I think a lot of people have really gotten in trouble kind of following a charismatic leader, sometimes kind of over the cliff. And so I don't know. I love that this is part of Loki's intro and part of who Loki says he is, and all those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Thor later says to Loki, "You think yourself above them? You miss the point of ruling." And so again, that opposite side of the coin of power and how we're looking at it. And in Thor's movie, you saw that transformation in him, and now we're seeing that transformation happen for Loki in the opposite way.
In the opposite direction. And good point, because that's such a great callback to Thor's solo movie, that Thor has learned and is learning what it means for someone to be a good king, and doesn't see those qualities that he recognizes in Odin, and that he recognizes as having been lacking in himself in the first Thor movie. Well,
it's not like he comes into this film, meets up with the Avengers, and then takes leadership either.
Right.
He sees the role that he's playing and the roles that other people are playing as well, and how they're important, and so he's not that same character that he was.
Yeah. One thing that I think this kind of came out to me, and maybe this might be me overthinking, and so you can just call me out on that. But there's one thing that jumped out at me this time is Captain America is talking, I believe, to Black Widow about Hulk, and the fact... Oh, no, I think he's talking to Coulson, and he's talking about the fact that, a lot of people were trying to replicate the super soldier serum. I still have trouble saying. And that it was Banner's attempt to replicate the super soldier serum that ended up in his becoming the Hulk. And one of the things that we tweeted on the main at Marvel _ Gospel, it's interesting to think that Banner was trying to recreate what made Cap, and it's like there's this thin line between Captain America and Hulk, right?
Oh wow, yeah.
Like there's this thin line between amplified goodness and amplified anger, and I don't know. I don't know what to do with that. But it's just really interesting that he was trying to create this serum, and in the process of creating the serum, maybe gets close, but creates something that instead of this super virtuous soldier, is this super angry monster. And there's I don't know. It seems like there's just kind of this thin line between the two.
Yeah, for sure. There's sorry, I'm mumbling. The point where Bruce Banner falls in the helicarrier and he first becomes the Hulk. I did sort of think back to Captain America and the reveal of Red Skull, or even how Dr. Erskine would talk about him and says it brings out what's truly inside you. And so I'm curious, I don't know if this is intentional or what, but I'm curious if this serum that Hulk is sort of works in the same way.
Yeah, and which would be really cool, because if that was something that they wanted to explore, I mean, why? I mean, is Bruce Banner's anger like a pre-existing condition
Right.
that like had something from the rest of his life that brought it out to the surface?
Yeah.
And
I also.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, during that scene where he falls in the helicarrier, it also made me think about Paul's words about having a thorn in my flesh. Because the look that Bruce Banner gives to Black Widow right before he becomes Hulk, like you can tell there's this pain. It's like this heartbreaking look in his face, and then he allows the Hulk to take over.
Yeah.
Because, well, in the comics, there's two very distinct characters. There's Bruce Banner and there's the Hulk. And a lot of times they are at war together. I don't know how much of that is translating into the movies. I think we'll see a big part of that in Thor Ragnarok.
I hope so.
But that look that Bruce Banner gives to Black Widow really made me think of not only Paul's words, but like that they're going to show those two different personas.
That's awesome. Like I've always been struck by that look too. That he knows what's about to happen, and he like what's in his face is like, which I mean, part of this is amazing because this is like a little bit Mark Ruffalo at this point and a lot CGI. But in his face at that point is it's regret, it's I'm sorry, it's fear, like it's everything of like he's at that moment where he's transitioning from Bruce Banner to Hulk, and he knows this thing's about to take him over, and he knows that like Black Widow could potentially be hurt by this thing that's about to take him over, and he's sorry about it, but for whatever reason, I mean, what's interesting to me in this moment is that for whatever reason, he doesn't have enough control to stop it. And I wonder about that. Like, is it just like, I mean, at this point leading up to that, there's been a lot of antagonism among the team. And then there's this explosion. And also, he had been holding Loki's scepter.
Yeah.
And so, like, which also controls minds. And so I wonder if, like, that combination of things, because we do see later, he does have a certain amount of control over this thing.
Right.
But at that point, he definitely doesn't.
Yeah.
And it could easily be chalked up to the explosion, but I think it might be more than that.
Well, and I think it speaks into our lives, into how we view control. And how even in times of unexpected catastrophe, like the explosion in the helicarrier, how do we react to those things? Are we okay with losing control and assessing that situation, or do we lose control of ourselves because of that loss of control?
Yeah.
In our surroundings.
Yeah. Do we let ourselves? Do we let that lack of control be an excuse for letting out the worst side of ourselves? Do we let our situations be an excuse for letting out our worst side? So yeah, it's a really good. That's a really good observation. I love that scene, and I just think there's so much good there. One of the things, going back a moment to Loki when he's in Germany, he comes out and he gives his speech to the people, and he tells them all to kneel, and they do all kneel at first, and then the one older man who you kind of get the sense that this man has been around for a while, right? and he says, I won't kneel, and I'll never kneel, never to not to men like you. And Loki says, there are no men like me. And his response is, there are always men like you.
Yep.
I love that exchange. Like, I mean, maybe one of the best exchanges, like, most powerful exchanges of the movie, and, like, none of the Avengers are involved in it.
Yeah.
For me, I've always been really struck by that line and by that encounter. Like, what are your thoughts on just kind of that exchange and those lines going back and forth?
Yeah, I think this movie actually does this in a couple different spots where it shows people without powers acting in very strong and powerful ways. Agent Coulson being one of them. Also, this man, Maria Hill.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head who else.
Well, Nick Fury and
Nick Fury.
and the police who are helping to evacuate New York City.
Yeah. So I think it really shows you that there's always hope. Coulson says the line later in the movie. We're kind of jumping around.
Yeah.
A lot. Sorry about that. But he says to Loki that he lacks conviction. And I think that's a big part of what it takes to give you courage. It not only takes conviction, but really like knowing your why of what it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
And for those people, it's obvious. So.
Yeah. I just think that man, he represents like kind of learning from history, that people don't just lose freedom, they give it up. It's not just that we're told to kneel and then we're forced to kneel. It's that we're told to kneel and we surrender. And this guy's like, no,
right.
I'd rather die than surrender my freedom to another power hungry madman.
Yeah.
And I also think part of that line, that there are always men like you, it actually steals some of Loki's thunder. It steals some of his, like, you're not special. Like, there's like, whether or not you're from Earth or from Asgard, there's always power hungry people, and they always act the same way. And you're not special. You're what happens when people get a little bit of power. There's nothing special about you.
I think we see that again when Fury says, "Let me know if Real Power wants a magazine." That's sort of like his dig at him, like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah. One of the things that just kind of as an aside, I would also credit this movie for. Robert Downey Jr. Obviously injected a lot of humor into the solo Iron Man films, and there's humor to be found. There's one-liners and everything in all of the movies up to this point. But I give Joss Whedon and the writers of this film a ton of credit for really introducing. This movie has parts that are just, the first time especially that I saw it, parts that are just laugh out loud funny. And the humor is kind of continuous throughout the film. Everyone, and no one, particularly of the main team, but like, no one gets cheated out of a one-liner. Everyone gets a chance to be funny. Anyway, I just think that's something that Marvel has seized upon and has carried forward. But I think this movie really showed them that they could do these great action pieces with these bigger than life heroes, and also just have them be really funny. And I think maybe the culmination of that has been Guardians of the Galaxy. And Guardians of the Galaxy 2, we'll hopefully have that as well. Hold on. I was being given options for dinner. Sorry about that. So one of the things that I actually really want to talk about, and can you hear the background noise a lot? You hear a little bit?
I hear it a little bit.
Okay. Hopefully it won't be too bad. So I will just try and speak up here. One of the things that I think is really interesting is that we get pretty early on after that fight in Germany. We've already got Captain America. We've already got Iron Man, and then on their way to the SHIELD headquarters, Thor shows up, and then we get the first inter-hero battle between Thor and Iron Man, and then Captain America. And it's interesting that, like, they're clearly for lack of a better term, they're clearly all the good guys. And yet they're going at it, they're fighting, and this fighting kind of continues on now for the second act of the movie. And it's because they all kind of have different agendas. They're not unified in their agenda. Thor wants to bring Loki back to Asgard, and Iron Man's more concerned with what's going on with S.H.I.E.L.D., and Captain America is just kind of following orders, and Bruce Banner's kind of like got scientific interest, and Nick Fury's got an agenda, and that's really interesting. That it's because of their agendas that they are divided and become divisible. I think that, like, obviously you need a conflict in your second act of your movie, but I really thought it was interesting how much time they dedicated to having tension between these characters.
Well, and I think they really needed to create a reason to pull them together. Which Nick Fury sort of concocts behind the scenes after Loki shows up, but it really begs the question: how do we handle desperation? Because I think even Nick Fury says to Loki, like, "You have made me very desperate." And so how do we, as individuals, handle that? And then how do we handle that together with all of our different personalities? Really makes me think of Paul's words in Corinthians about how we're all one body, different parts to one body, and how the hand can't say, I'm misquoting this, I have no idea, the hand can't say to the foot that it doesn't need you, you know what I mean? It really made me think of that during this whole fighting scene, that they were like just trying to take that control, but different agendas, like you said.
And I think I like that desperation image, because I've served, I've only served small churches, and churches that have been really hurting for resources, hurting for relevance, hurting for meaning, and those kinds of churches, particularly with the first church I served, or the first full-time church I served, it was, people really did have very differing agendas of what it meant for this church to go forward, and that ultimately, I think, is a big part of why that church is no longer around. And it really is, when you're desperate, you kind of lose you become kind of self-focused, and you kind of become you lose sight of being a part of something larger. And that's kind of what happens with everyone here. Is that they all lose sight of being a part of something larger. And like I think Tony is very interesting here because Tony is he's the one who's initially suspicious of Shield and like immediately gets on the bridge of the helicarrier and starts hacking their computer. Um, and you know, for him it's for Tony it's the game of can I outsmart everyone? Can I be the smartest person up here? And that's like literally part of his agenda is like can I be smart? Can I be smarter than everyone else here?
Right.
And you know he proves that he can be, but that doesn't help the group so much.
Right.
In fact, it actually ends up being pretty divisive for the group. Yeah. Let's see what else is there. I don't know if this was intentional, but I thought it was kind of cool that the weapons program that they're talking about is referred to as Phase 2.
Phase 2. Yeah. I chuckled whenever I heard that again too.
It's like were they trying to signal that they were going into Phase 2?
Yeah.
But again, one of the other I was kind of just going back to the conflict here. I love the camera work in the scene where Iron Man's going at it with Captain America. Thor is kind of going at it with everyone. Fury's going at it with all of them. Bruce Banner's going at and Bruce Banner's holding the scepter, and the camera is just kind of swirling around in a circle, and it just kind of looks chaotic. I love the camera work there because it really communicates the internal chaos of what's happening to these people who are supposed to be a team, a group, and they're just kind of chaos at this point.
That scene for the first time, I've watched this tons of times, but for the first time watching that scene, I thought, how much power does the Mind Stone actually have? Like, what is the scope of it? How, like, there's really you can't understand it just through this film. I'm sure, like, they'll explore that more in the Infinity War and whatnot, but I thought that during that scene.
Yeah.
And how much that affected him.
Yeah, and like, how much of a trap was that to have the Mind Stone in their possession again, particularly to have the Mind Stone, like, to have Banner be the one who picks it up, and, like, how much of that was the trigger for him hulking out. But it does seem like it is, yes, there's these agendas, but, is it also the fact that Loki kind of planted this time bomb among them that was going to turn them against each other?
Yeah.
Which I think again kind of proves like Loki's playing a long game here. He wants them to tear each other apart so that he doesn't have any opposition to his nameless, faceless alien army of the Chitauri. Let's see here. One of the things I want to talk about, the idea Black Widow brings up when she's talking to Loki, of this idea of, I have a lot of red in my ledger. Because for me, that's about redemption. That's about atoning for one's sins. Now, she's still doing the same kind of work. Instead of killing for the bad guys, she's killing for the good guys. But I really thought it was very interesting that they brought that element into the film. That this is a person who is seeking redemption.
Yeah.
I really like that as a character element for her, because she hasn't gotten a ton of screen time. They've had to do the most character development in the shortest amount of time with her and Hawkeye, and I kind of like that part of her character is that she's done a lot of terrible things, and Loki kind of lists them off for her.
Yeah.
And she could easily be driven to guilt by those things, but instead she's driven to try to redeem herself.
Mm-hmm. Which you continue to see that story arc played out too.
Yeah.
Especially into Winter Soldier. But I think that's a good point, looking for redemption, because I think each of the characters really takes on that you can see regret in nearly all of them through this movie, and then coming together to sort of seek out that redemption. Yeah, that's a good insight.
Yeah. Another thing, there's so many things here. Loki and Thor, their relationship is kind of interesting because even when we first see Loki and Thor together, Thor expresses, we all thought you were dead and we grieved you and we missed you, and even in the midst of what should be him being really angry, and he still has this love for Loki, and Loki in return sees that Thor has become full of sentiment, which he sees as weakness.
Yes.
And that he is filled with he has compassion for people, and he has love for people, and Loki sees all of that as weakness, and even that love that he has for Loki he sees as weakness. Yeah. I think it's really great, and again, like with this movie moving at the pace that it does, no one gets a ton of screen time to do these things. So to be able to express that difference between these two brothers, even at the end as they're fighting, and I still chuckle at the end because, like, what is it in Loki that makes him think that he can go one-on-one, hand-to-hand combat with Thor? Yeah. I'll never understand that.
Well, and then I always chuckle at the part where he stabs him, and, like, he actually does go down for a second.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking, that's what it took to take down Thor. But then he gets back up, and
he like power drives.
Just kind of momentary weakness.
He's like, "Ow! You stabbed me." Okay, I'm good. Yeah, I mean, even at that point, though, he's still trying to. He's trying to not only work for his own redemption, and less work for his own redemption in this one, as working for Loki's redemption. Like, even at that point, he's still trying to say to them, like, you can call this off, you can stop this. And Loki kind of has this moment of, like, could I stop this? Maybe. I don't know. Stab Thor. And then, like, no. Stabbing Thor instead.
There's no regret in his mindset. I am fully committed to this venture.
Yeah. What do you do? What do you do with the line? And maybe I don't know. It's hard to say the most famous or favorite line. But what do you do with the line of Bruce Banner saying that that's my secret, Captain, I'm always angry?
Yeah, at the end of it. Sorry, it made me think of the end of The Incredible Hulk, where you see Edward Norton sort of controlling the Hulk in a sense, and I'm curious if that's actually the secret, or if he just believes that's the secret.
Yeah.
In that moment, because like we talked about, there's really the two distinct personalities, and so I don't know if that's I'm always angry as in saying like I'm in control of this anger, or it's just like a sort of giving in to that darkness within him.
Yeah.
But I do think that it was like a great line for the movie, and the timing really was perfect.
Yeah. And I love everything that kind of follows there is great.
Yeah.
What earlier in the film, Tony kind of teases him and says, kind of, let him out and kind of let him strut and like you might have fun. I think part of it is, it's interesting because he does particularly in the very cheesy line, which I still love, of Captain America hollering out all the orders, and then he says, Hulk, smash. And Hulk smiles, he smiles. He gets to destroy things, and he gets to break things, I do always, I wonder, is there some joy that he takes in letting this anger out in this way, and is there something for him that's freeing and liberating about being the Hulk, and maybe the thing he fears about it is that it is kind of a joy that could take him over. It is something that he maybe enjoys too much. That he's scared of losing the control because it actually is something, not so tragic. It's something that he actually really kind of, maybe gets kind of high on, or it's interesting. I think, that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and maybe that's part of the reason why he hesitates too, because he realizes that he does enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that speaks a lot even to our own thoughts or addictions or the things that make us feel good.
Yeah, and I think it's both a I think it's a caution about losing ourselves to those things that allow us to feel pleasure, feel momentary pleasures and things like that. I also, though, think that there's I think the opposite lesson is also important of sometimes when you bottle up and don't allow yourself to enjoy things, when you finally do, you go overboard. I think of college kids who have lived under their parents' roofs for so long, and particularly Christian kids, will live under their parents' roofs for so long, get to college and lose their minds because it's the first time that they actually have freedom and they become someone else. And I know with you doing what you've done for so long, I know you've seen that.
Yeah.
But so I think there's I don't know. I think there's two sides of that, right? There's not getting carried away by the things that we enjoy, but I think there's also being able to there also is something very good in being able to find joy in places, and particularly at this point, the kind of the flip side of this is that joy, the joy or happiness or even just whatever it is that he's feeling at that moment is in him getting to be Hulk because he gets to help people,
right?
Because he gets to use the full extent of his power to do something good, and I think
that speaks so much into really living into the fullness of who God created you to be. So not that God has created Earth Creator's Hulk, but I think that does speak to us in really allowing ourselves to live out of our gifts, the fullness of our gifts.
Yeah. Yeah, and the joy that comes with that, right? The joy, and I mean, you're a musician, and the joy of getting to write and perform and and yeah, sometimes that, we were talking right before we get on. Sometimes that joy is coupled with the agony of trying to get a song out and trying to actually do the creative process. Um, but there's joy that comes in living into our gifts. In speaking and writing, I can get very frustrated in trying to write and trying to say something, and yet I would trade the agony that I feel while I'm trying to write and trying to express myself that way. Like, I'll take that agony like 9 times out of 10, because of the fulfillment that comes in being able to express my full self, in a skill and a gift that I have.
Yeah.
So.
Which, again, taking us back to Thor Ragnarok, like, how exciting is that? Maybe he's actually, like, living into or allowing the Hulk out.
Yeah. I'm so excited for it because, not to slight tangent. Part of the excitement is like, so we're not able yet to get, because of some other contractual things, we're not able yet to get a full solo Hulk movie, but they are bringing in some elements from Planet Hulk, which was a very popular comic book run where Hulk kind of takes over a planet and like really just kind of gets, because he's considered too dangerous to be on Earth, gets to like take over a planet and just let loose, and wear badass gladiator armor.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting. Well, and we'll talk about this later. Never mind.
No, go. I
don't want to go into Thor Ragnarok. We're talking about.
I know. It's just exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah.
One of the things, and kind of just wanted to end with this, is that, and again, this kind of circles back around to our. No. There's two things I want to talk about. Two last things I want to talk about. One is this moment for Iron Man where Tony takes the nuclear missile, which is fired at Manhattan, which I think is a very bad idea, and he throws it into this wormhole, and he looks up, and he's in outer space, and he sees this kind of alien fleet, and just kind of on surface, of course, like, this is an action movie, and so this we're used to seeing these kinds of things happen, and then heroes kind of walk away and get ready for the next adventure. This is actually one of those moments, and we don't realize at the time, but this is kind of the moment that changes Tony forever.
Yeah.
This is the moment where he thinks about the magnitude of what he does, what the Avengers are doing, and it kind of leads him on, it leads him into some interesting places in Iron Man 3.
Right.
Not my favorite movie, but some really interesting character pieces there for Tony Stark. But it also kind of like leads into Ultron, and it leads into Civil War in some really interesting ways. So I wanted to like hold that up. And part of what I think is changing for him is that, more so than anything else he's done, this is the thing that gets him in touch with his own mortality.
Right. Well, and I think this scene proves Steve Rogers wrong earlier when he says to him in the helicarrier that you're not the one to make the sacrifice play.
Right.
And that's exactly what he does in this final act. And, but yeah, like you said, it really is formational for his character in the upcoming movies.
Yeah.
And it'll be curious, I'm curious to see how all of this changes him for Infinity War and whatnot, because I'm sure that he will have a big role, and that'll change him again.
Yeah, I would think so. And I also, I think part of it is, we didn't talk much in this one about the dichotomy between Iron Man and Captain America, but I do think the difference here is that Captain America is a soldier who came up against his mortality all the time, like as someone, particularly someone fighting in a war. For Tony, he's always had a situation that he could talk his way out of, think his way out of. Ever since he made the suit for the first time, he's always been able to talk, think, create his way out of his problems. And it's only, that someone caught him in mid-fall that he walks out of this situation. Right. I think it's another difference between the two characters of Steve kind of can go into those battle moments, those facing my mortality moments, and kind of come out unshaken. Iron Man, and I think part of what makes him a little bit more relatable sometimes, is the fact that he comes out of this facing his mortality moment completely shaken. And completely different person. And it's just kind of an interesting moment that I think didn't realize at the time it was going to be as big of a deal as it was, but then kind of going forward into the future movies, it becomes really important.
Well, and it's interesting that he makes the Jonah reference before he does that, because I think even in Jonah's story, going to that terrifying place changes him in some ways for good, in some ways for bad too. So it's interesting.
Yeah. It's a good connection. I think that I love that. You ever hear the tale of Jonah? I wouldn't consider him a role model.
Well, it's a good funny one-line too.
It's another great one-liner, and but also does kind of connect to what's happening in the movie.
Yeah.
One last thing that I kind of want to look at, and this is kind of how the movie ends, is that Nick Fury has his church council that he has to report back to, and sort of the immediate media response, and particularly less so from the media and the people who are interviewed on the street, but definitely from Nick Fury's council and from the politicians. Control of the Avengers immediately becomes an issue. Who controls them? Who are they accountable to? Where are they going? How are we going to keep tabs on them? And this, again, is something that we're going to see be an issue for the next, 7 movies.
Yeah.
It's really, really interesting that accountability now that power has kind of been revealed, who's going to be accountable for it. So while, sort of our first phase is kind of like, what do you do with power? We're starting to move into this phase of who's going to be accountable for power.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really interesting shift that I think is just a really interesting shift in superhero movies. I think we saw this with, not to go there, but I think with Man of Steel and Dawn of Justice, for so long we've had these superhero movies and action films where massive destruction takes place and untold casualties may have happened, and there's not really been the accountability for that.
Yeah.
And I like to think that maybe what changed is 9/11. Is we think about these things a little bit more of the accountability for you can't destroy a building in a movie anymore without thinking about that. And I think that and I think this is part of our thinking as people now, is that we are thinking a lot more about how do we hold our powerful people accountable? Whether that's politicians, celebrities, athletes, whatever, artists, whatever, we think about that a little bit more.
Well, I think Spider-Man Homecoming is going to dive a little bit into that idea too.
Yeah.
Because it's rumored that the Vulture and some other characters in there are supposed to be on damage control. So that'll be an interesting concept.
Yeah.
There too, so.
That'll be very cool, and of course that goes with the overarching "with great power comes great responsibility" motto of Spider-Man, which I think is, in some ways, the motto of Marvel. So I think that'll be cool.
Yeah, I think in this movie, the Avengers, Fury's able to take responsibility, even when the Council makes wrong decisions. In that, he is still able to make that right decision, and takes that responsibility on himself.
Yeah,
so that's a kind of a good sign for what we're looking for.
Well, and I think because earlier in the film you do sort of question his motives, and why is he just he's building weapons, and that's why he wants the Tesseract, and that's what they've been doing since the Destroyer came in Thor. Right. But ultimately, I think Nick Fury's part of the good guys, and we want to be on Nick Fury's side, and we want to believe that his intentions are good and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's why we see him ultimately taking responsibility for the Avengers, taking responsibility for not nuking Manhattan and disobeying, which is a terrible idea, and trying to stop that, and he kind of he is kind of the buck stops with me kind of leader, and
right.
And it's interesting because there is a lot of moral ambiguity with these characters, because it's weird to live in a world where people have the kinds of powers that these characters have.
Yep.
Any final thoughts on Avengers?
No, it was fun to do the live tweeting.
Yeah.
I know there wasn't a ton of us, but it was still a lot of fun to kind of interact on Facebook and Twitter with people, and hopefully in the future we can do that again. Yeah,
I'd love to do more of that, and thank you for those of you who did show up, and even if you weren't there for the live tweet, just you can still check out the hashtag GA2M, and just kind of read some of the things that we tweeted, and you can still respond to them. We'll still see them, so that's fun.
We realize we're not the only ones with that hashtag either.
Well, we might have to bully. We might have to do some Twitter bullying and get people off that hashtag.
Or just change it.
Or change it, whatever. whichever seems easier. So with that, I have with that, we are coming at the end of phase 1. So we'll be coming back with new episodes soon. I think part of what Zane and I need to talk about is where we go from here in terms of, do we jump into the movies, or do we keep going with the movies, or do we jump into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which would actually be season 1 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. would actually be the next place to go chronologically. So something to think about. And if you have some thoughts about that, feel free to tweet us or Facebook message us on the Facebook group Gospel According to Marvel. And but yeah, definitely looking forward to doing more of these conversations and getting more interaction. You can find me at Derek L. Weston. You can find our group, our podcast Twitter account at Marvel_Gospel. You can find Zane at Zane E. Sanders. You can find our Facebook group, Gospel According to Marvel. And
we have so much stuff.
There's so many ways to get in touch with us.
Goodness.
Also, if you wouldn't mind going to iTunes and rating us and giving comments and stuff like that. And also feel free to, on any of those places, feel free to send us suggestions about the show and
please do.
Questions, comments, stuff like that. We can. And also make sure to just like, I mean, we're both pretty social media savvy guys, but if you do see some Marvel Cinematic Universe related news popping up that might not have gone on the radar for either of us, let us know. Flag us so that we can see it. Because I for one, I think Zane does too. We love to keep up with the goings on at Marvel because
Yeah.
it's always something fun.
Absolutely. And if you guys see any connections with anything Marvel with your faith, shoot us some of those ideas too, because we want to continue looking through that lens.
Yeah, and certainly if you've used any of the movies in your whether it's with your youth group or a sermon or anything like that, yeah, shoot us those things too, because I'd love to see some of those examples. That'd be really cool too.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for today.
That's it.
Until next time, we'll be back in a couple weeks talking about something Marvel related. But till then, we'll talk to you later.
Bye, guys.
Where did GarageBand go?